All right, I think we're live. Welcome everyone to this update. We are going to go through just a few things before the actual talking starts. I decided to move this forward. I was going to do this at 10:15, but I've decided to just jump on because the numbers came out just after the close of the business hours in the US, so that was about 50 minutes ago. It actually took a bit longer than normal. It usually pops up straight away, but it actually took a few minutes. I'll admit I was only reading it for the last 5 minutes or so because I was eating and doing a few other things beforehand. But I've just been through the numbers and I made some notes. There's quite a few interesting things that I kind of noticed already that I think are worth talking about. And I don't know if for anyone who hasn't been following Tesla very closely, they announced not too long ago that they had a very good quarter for sales. They sold the record number of cars in the last quarter. They sold like record-breaking numbers in China. All of these different updates were really interesting. Hello, everyone. But I was kind of expecting, I actually posted on Twitter just earlier today saying that I wasn't sure whether they're actually going to be hitting some of the numbers despite those record sales. And there's a few different factors for that. So the one biggest factor, so before we dive into the numbers, I'm going to walk you through these and then we'll go and talk about the numbers. The first really big factor that happened was they stopped production of the S and X line. There was a couple of different reasons. They had a factory fire and a major kind of issue there, which actually took longer than expected to resolve, and there was a lot of issues with that. They actually halted the production line in order to do a bunch of upgrades to the Model S and the Model X over in Fremont in the California factory, and that although they're not pointing to this at all in this update, which I will show you in a second, that seems to be going on for much, much longer than expected. And I haven't seen any of the other analysts pick up on that, which I think is a really important point. That to me is a really bad sign. I also expected the margin to be quite low this quarter, just simply because they haven't sold any Model S's, Model X's, and I expected that to be a real issue. But I'm going to be showing you that actually didn't materialize. However, everyone was really excited kind of over the last 3 months when people were publishing valuations, ARK Invest, all the other big funds, and people generally take a bet on either the robotaxi side of the business or the energy side of the business. And the one thing we're seeing so far is that I'm going to show you where I'm seeing these numbers. Both of those are significantly behind where I think people were expecting them to be. Let me just turn down this. I forgot to turn down my volume slightly. 1 second. All right. So on both of those, they're behind. So it's kind of weird because I'm going to be showing you that some of the public numbers, the official big numbers that people were that everyone talks about, the media prints, they look good in this report. But the numbers that I personally care about, they don't look good at all to me. And some of them are a massive, massive miss. So I know Tesla in post trading is slightly down. I actually think tomorrow might be much more red than that. It's only about 2 to 3% down, but I think it might go for a lot further south. Just because of those long-term expectations on both energy and full self-driving / robotaxi are really not progressing. And the worst bit for me is there isn't really any update in this written stuff. So we shall see. So let's go through what they've published. I've got the report over here. So here's the Q1 update. So let's go through and I will show you what it is that I'm talking about here. So talk about the highlights. Let's skip that. We'll come to that in a second. Here's the interesting thing. So they sold a record number of cars, more than Q4, but you can see that automotive revenues over here. Let me place myself somewhere else. You can see the automotive revenues here are a drop. And a big reason for that, one sec, there you go. A big reason for that is because they're selling cheaper cars, right? So because they're not selling any Model S's, Model X's, in the update, I think the numbers are a bit further down here. You can see they've sold they've sold 2,000 Model S's, Model X's, and 182,800 Model 3Ys. You can see that the total revenues dropped, even though the total number of cars that they've sold actually went up. A jump in 100 million on regulated credits, but most people ignore those when they do the calculations. So that number is kind of good for them because it helps with cash, it puts more money in the bank, but it doesn't really affect kind of people's perceptions about long-term viability of the business and the benefits that that this brings. So I think like people in the media like to look at this number and say how important it is and how it's propping Tesla up. The truth is, it is becoming relatively immaterial. Like we're talking, very small total percentage out of the, we're talking 5% or so out of this total revenue number. But here are some of the interesting points that I was looking at earlier. So let me just show you them one by one. So first off, this number over here, the net income attributable to common stockholders, so the US GAAP version of it, so the official accounting version of it. Pretty good, looks really good. And this number over here is the really good one. So this is the non-GAAP. So this is basically like the more realistic number, the number that sort of like applies to the business rather than the way accounting has to be done. Because with accounting, you have to, pocket losses that you expect to happen at some points in the future, yada yada yada. So this number is a bit more interesting. And this number here, 93 cents, this is much bigger than what all the analysts were forecasting. I think, like, depending which publication you read, roughly speaking, people were expecting this to be about 80 cents. So this is a really good number in terms of the way it looks, right? And even the EBITDA, so this is Q1. Q1 is typically much lower than Q4, but they almost hit the same number despite selling almost no Model S, Model X's. So these all look kind of good. And so on the surface, if you just looked at this, at the headline numbers, especially the stuff that they are showing over here on this big page up here, you're going to be looking going, well, this makes a whole lot of sense. This is all good. I'm happy. It looks like the price is going to be going in the right direction. But I didn't like a lot of stuff that comes further down. And here is one thing. This number over here, this was expected to be low, and this was expected to be kind of zero, close to zero, but because they of the two reasons that I mentioned earlier, the shutdown and the revamp of some of the production lines, because they're upgrading both Model S, Model X production over in Fremont, but it's zero rather than a small number. And that is really important, because what that means is that this shutdown is continuing into the second quarter. And the thing that I found really interesting is there is no real update from when I was briefly reading this as to exactly what the end date of this is. It kind of says, reduced makes of Model S, Model X, our average cost declined to sub 38,000 per vehicle. I get all that, but there was on the operational side, there is nothing really mentioned on this front as to maybe if somebody can see something that I haven't read because I quickly skimmed it, please do. So they talk about first deliveries of the new Model S should start very shortly, but I don't like very shortly because we are already towards the end of the first month, right? So we're towards the end of the first month, and I know that this was prepared a few days back rather than right now, but very shortly, when we're already a third of the way through the second quarter, doesn't sound very good. So some of the other things are good. So the progress with Model Y looks really good, and Berlin and Texas are still on schedule for delivery for beginning production at the end of this year, although there's some question marks around that as well that we're going to come to. But this to me is a problem. This is zero over here, because this implies that Q2 numbers are also going to be significantly lower for Model S, Model X, despite them kind of needing to ramp up that production line in the future to continue the mix. However, the really interesting thing, kind of that counters that, if you're going to look at the numbers, is the fact that where is it? It's right. I think it's right at the end. So we'll skip around this document because these numbers kind of relate to each other. So right at the end, you'll notice they have this thing over here where they talk about automotive gross margin without these regulatory credits. And this is the real business version, not the US GAAP version. And that number is 22%, which is incredibly good, because this means that they are making this margin on just the Model 3 and Model Y sales. And the really interesting point here for me is the fact that it's not just Model 3, Model Y sales, but it's also a huge chunk of this is China sales. And in China, they've dropped the price significantly over the last 3 months in order to compete with some of the local manufacturers. So there's that. They are exporting some of the Chinese models over to Europe, but that's not a huge part of it. But I'm amazed that they're still able to maintain 22% margin here, despite the fact that a lot of this Model 3, Model Y, especially given the volume they're selling in China. There was an interesting point that I read somewhere in this report, I can't remember where it was, that said that they're now upped their Chinese manufacturing to have 90% local sourcing. So that is probably a big component of it. Obviously, Chinese running of the production line and the costs associated are also lower as well. So there's all of that. One second, I'm gonna have a little drink. So this is interesting, but let me go through some of the numbers kind of more in order and point out some other things that I find really interesting in this report. So one of the things that people are really excited about with Tesla is their investment in the future. And you can see that this is impacting their cash position quite significantly on this first page of data just below the headline thing. You can see that their capex has gone up even more to 1.3 billion for the quarter, which is significant, and it's more than I think some of the people expected, and it's certainly a lot. Even when I look at the numbers that I was projecting a few weeks back for capex for this year, this is quite a bit. So I had 4.5 billion for the whole year, and given that they're probably going to be accelerating this, this is an interesting number. This is a really interesting number. So their free cash flow, so essentially the amount of money that they are able to put back in the bank after all the incomes and all the outgoings, has dropped massively, right? And there's one big reason for it. They went and bought a load of Bitcoin somewhere in here. You can see further down in the numbers. 1 second, I'll show you the number over here. Yeah. Here they bought 1.5 billion of Bitcoin, which was very public. What wasn't public until this report came out is this number over here. They sold 272 billion, so they sold like about a sixth ish. I don't know, I'm not going to do the math right now, just under off their Bitcoin since they purchased it. So they have hedged a little bit net, so maybe they did more trading than that, but net, this is the position they're in. So they aren't holding the full 1.5, which is an interesting thing, because although they sold all of that, they're still, oh, look, we have guests. 1 second, let me get this guest. Say hello to the crowd. Wave. All right. So we sold some Bitcoin, which is interesting. But even so, we're seeing over here that this number, the free cash flow, is almost equivalent to that. So we're in this position where we've lost over 2 billion in cash, in essence, because of this move of all the combination of different things. And that's quite a noticeable amount. So their cash flow, you can see their position has been growing massively. So this massive investment, so this is what I was talking about in some of the videos before, this massive investment of building these new factories, all the R&D spend, which we're going to come to in just a second, all of these things are beginning to actually impact it. And this is something that's really worth noting, because this cash position, if it continues going down, say for the next 3 to 4 quarters, we could get into a position where actually this is beginning to look, because the plans are so big, but the plans can only be supported if the ramp up in sales continues as well. And we're not seeing that. And here is the really important thing. So here is all the car numbers, very exciting. They have like not much movement in any of this, but here is the big stuff. Look at this: solar deployed and storage deployed. And in the first quarter, the solar hasn't gone really anywhere. And nobody really expected much from it, but here is the really big drop. Look at this: storage deployed is only 445, a quarter of what it was in Q4. Now, some people say that there are other reasons for it, that it's like, you know, happens in the same quarters, that people make use of tax breaks, because in the US the calendar year is the tax year. So in the US, if you want to go and like save a bit on some of your taxes, you might go and deploy some green initiatives towards the end of the year. And I kind of get that. But this is a huge drop, especially that this is the same quarter when a month and a half ago, whenever it was announced that Apple was installing a bunch of their stuff. And it was also announced that both the Texas and the California governments are apparently considering / maybe signing deals / all of that stuff. So this is a huge drop for me. I know they're saying there's a big rise on this Q1 number over here, but this to me, because this is 1/2 of the kind of the big extra opportunities over and above the car manufacturing that people kind of give. Like, I certainly have been extremely optimistic about this, but this number is looking really poor, and I certainly would be downgrading my expectations on the growth of this business over the next few months considerably. So I had in terms of energy revenue, I think I had 4.3 billion for the year, and I don't see them getting even close to that as it stands. So that's going to be an interesting one. The other thing that I noticed over here is that if you look at the supercharger stations and the supercharger connectors, this number hasn't grown really at all. And again, they're doing year-on-year comparisons over here, which makes no sense with something like superchargers, which, like, you know, grow quarter on quarter. They don't grow year-on-year. But you can see the deployment across the US over here that was kind of like growing, doing really good stuff, you know, like big jump in Q4. And I know that absolute numbers here and here look similar in terms of the jumps, but I'm not seeing the sort of the acceleration which you need to keep it relatively growing. And I get that people are installing things at home, and I get that maybe they're reaching some, but 2,700 stations for the entire business is not that many. If you really think about it, if you think about like how covering the world, and it's not that many. So there's definitely some improvement that needs to happen on this, because this is going to slow down adoption. You know, as more cars are hitting the roads, but this number is not going up. That's going to increase wait times. It's going to increase frustrations. It's going to increase negative publicity, negative stories. So there's especially given that Tesla's going down this route of we have our own and everyone else has to use their own. So that's definitely going to be something very noticeable. So I think that is an important number that I haven't heard other people really talk about. And now we come to this usual section they have over here, which is all about their production lines. And there's not much interesting stuff here, but there are a couple of things that I really wanted to highlight. The first one is, if you look over here, the total production that they are saying they're now running at, which is sort of like the effective run rate, is just over 1,050,000, which is interesting because it's very close to my projections. I had 1 million total cars produced during 2021, and obviously they had the pause at the beginning of the year for the Model S, Model X's. So although this is the run rate, the annual capacity, they're obviously not going to be getting, a quarter of this, and possibly more. So we're probably looking at an annual production of Model S, Model X's this year, maybe in the sort of like 60,000, 65,000 territory, possibly. Maybe not even that. So they're not going to reach this number. This number in Shanghai is still in the sort of acceleration phase, so it's hard to know exactly how much of the acceleration they baked into this number. And this is the really interesting thing for me, that I read a few reports from people who read this, you know, on the media. But look at this. Berlin Model Y, Texas Model Y, and Cybertruck in development. But here is the really interesting thing. TBD. It doesn't say what it is. It doesn't say where it is. But the Tesla Semi is now being produced in TBD, not in Texas. And this is a shift, and this is a change that I haven't seen other people mention. And this is important for two reasons. I actually think this is a great thing. It's important for two reasons. So they're saying in some of the stuff further down, that they're still expecting, somewhere in this report, I've read it, that they're still expecting the Semi potentially to be coming out at the end of this year for the first production. But this table, unless there's a mistake in this table, this is saying that this is going to be produced in a factory that hasn't even yet been announced. So if that is genuinely the case, and maybe I'm completely misrepresenting it, there is absolutely no way that that is going to be producing this year, and it may well be that it's going to be delayed well into next year as well, unless there's some kind of issue that I'm not picking up here. But this is like, unless this TBD shouldn't be here, or maybe I'm misunderstanding something. But this is a big thing, because this was going to be produced in Texas, but they obviously started production on the Model Y line, and the apparent expectation is that as soon as that is kind of further down in terms of the development, then they're going to start the Cybertruck line. But they haven't even started producing the Tesla Semi line, manufacturing line. And so I think that this is going to be pushed back quite significantly. So when I did my sort of valuation video about Tesla, I expected that one of these two would be pushed out, and it's looking like they're pushing Tesla Semi, but even further than I expected. Here, they're expecting Roadster to be produced at the same factory, and they have this future product, which is a really interesting thing, because people have been suspecting that they're going to be doing a Model 2 version or a $25,000 version car, or whatever it is. And it looks like maybe this is the first time that they're saying that this is actually sort of official. It'd be really interesting to see when we actually get to the live call, and the live call should be on this website over here, what they actually say about that. We shall find out. So this is going to be interesting. Somebody's pointing out that they hold a ton of money for the Cybertruck deposits. They are, but it's only $100 a piece, and if they have to refund, I'm sure that's not going to cause too much issues. But so it'll be interesting to see if there's any questions about this. Because this is obviously a Model 2 play. Well, not obviously, I'm suspecting this is a Model 2 play. But the bigger play, and this is the one I think that's actually probably more important for the long-term commercials, is this one. Does this mean that Tesla Semi is not being produced this year and possibly very late next year? Is this genuinely going to be produced in a new factory? We shall see what they say about that, because that's going to be a really interesting one. Anyway, what else did I want to talk about in these numbers? I think I talked about all of these. Energy. Let's talk about some of the numbers to do with energy, because I talked about the deployment, which has slowed down massively, but it gets worse with energy than that. Because if we look further down, and this is, I think, really critical here, there's some photos. So they're building Berlin. This is the stamping press for the Model Y in Berlin, all looking pretty good. This is Giga Texas, progressing apparently faster than expected. But this is the Model Y factory. So they have all this extra space, which is going to be the stuff that was going to produce a Cybertruck and the Semi. It looks like it's only going to be the Cybertruck at the moment as the expectation. But you can see there's one picture here. Somewhere of the big press in Texas, I think. I can't see it. Maybe I saw it somewhere else. All right. So here is the interesting thing. In a financial statement, if you look at energy, so if I look at energy generation and storage, I apologize if you can't see this very well. If I zoom in, you can't see what it says on the left. But energy generation and storage over here, the revenue has dropped considerably from Q4. And this is a really important point, because deployment is kind of one thing, and it is important, to continue growing the energy side of the business, which is one of the biggest bets for Elon, and certainly, like, I expected this to do well. But the actual revenue from the entire business in the energy generation storage has actually dropped, and not dropped by a bit, but dropped considerably. But the worst bit is, if I go and look at the cost of the energy business, which is this bit over here, then we're down 101 million. And that is considerably more than the 35 million that we were down in the last quarter. So not only are they way down in terms of generation, but obviously the fact that they are potentially underutilizing some of the storage, but the fact that they're not necessarily making use of it, is making a really big dent, and this is not going in the right direction. So I get that it's growing, but the growth is really not delivering and really not performing. So I think this is going to be an interesting line of questioning if it gets to that. So that'll be quite interesting to hear what Tesla has to say about that. What else do we pick up? Yeah. So one interesting thing is they claimed, with their deployment of energy, that they are so busy and there's so much work going on that they are now restricting both Powerwall and solar development to only customers who are buying one of their cars as well. And this is really important, because they're saying the solar restriction is a permanent measure. They're saying they do want to continue deploying solar, like residential solar, outside of the car sector. Sorry, Powerwall. God. They want to deploy the Powerwall stuff outside of car sales as a separate standalone item in the future. This is just a temporary measure. But the solar, they're saying, will now only be on a permanent basis sold together with people who are buying cars and or Powerwalls. And in this case, at the moment, the situation is you can only get both of those if you're buying cars. But these numbers here, in terms of the deployment, they're just not supporting this at all. So is it that they're just redeveloping their business? Is it that they had some kind of issues? It would be interesting to hear what the official line on that is. What else have we got in my notes? Yeah, I think I've covered some of the most pertinent, important points. What are people saying? Yeah, solar energy becomes saturated. I'm not really particularly excited about the solar energy business at all, really. I'm much more excited about their deployment of the storage solutions, because that's what can really drive a lot of value if done right, because of the huge differences between like time of day and day of week pricing, and because of the fluctuations in non-renewable and renewable performances and what that can bring, and especially with some states like Texas recently showing how important this kind of stuff could be in solving issues. But anyway, we shall see what the answers to those questions are. But back to let's go and look at some of the stuff that I skipped in my attempt to go and try to show you stuff as quickly as possible. Let's go and look at some of the other numbers. Somebody pointing out they're updating the existing chargers to V3. I do hear that, but although it's going to be faster, although it's going to be more convenient, it's faster to charge, especially the bigger batteries that are now being installed. It's still, to me, an issue that the growth is stalling and not really accelerating. I get that this replacement is going on, but given how many cars are hitting the streets, I would want a bit more. So here, let's read a bit about what they're saying about the factories. And the issue for me, in when I was reading this before, is they kind of there isn't much interesting stuff in here. They're not really saying very much. Saying Model Y continues to ramp successfully in Texas. The factory build out continues to progress quickly, remaining on track to start production deliveries late this year. Recently began moving equipment into the building and are in process of commissioning in certain areas. Very generic. It's exactly the same update, I actually think, in different words as what they had last time. But the interesting is, if you look at Berlin, it kind of says the same thing. In Europe, build-out on Gigafactory Berlin is continuing to move forward. Production and deliveries remaining on track for late 2021. They could have just copied and pasted. Machinery for paint, stamping, casting, etc. continues to be moved into the building. In the meantime, we will continue to increase import volumes to Europe. So what they're saying is the Chinese factory that is scaling over here, that's the over 90% that I mentioned earlier. Over 90% of the sourcing supply line in China is from within China, which is really good because that's what's allowing them to keep that margin really high. So Texas and Berlin, no update, but I'm amazed that, for example, in this update over here, they're saying nothing about what's happening with that semi, why that is no longer on track, why that no longer should be produced in Texas, and where is it going to be produced. There's no update within this from what I saw. If some of you can tell me, maybe I'm missing it somewhere. But anyway, here's another miss for me. They're saying a team continues to focus on the V9 development of full self-driving City Streets Beta, which will soon become more widely available in the United States. So this is another delay. This has been going on for quite some time, and people kind of keep saying, like, they're very bullish about what they're doing, but in the meantime, everybody else is developing very interesting systems, maybe not all in the same vein, and everyone's using slightly different technology and slightly, some people are going LiDAR, some people are going cameras and sort of like AI, so everyone's going slightly different routes, but this update doesn't say really anything. It's just like blah blah blah. As a result, our FSD team is fully focused on evolving to a vision-based autonomous system. So this is their direction. They're not going down the radar route. Nearly ready to switch the US market to Tesla vision. So again, this update doesn't really say anything concrete, and together with some of the other updates, I'm just concerned that they're not specifically stating like, this is that we're expecting this to be rolled out in Q2 or in Q3 or in H2. Nothing, and this to me sends some kind of warning flags. So there we go. Over-the-air software updates and maps and infotainment systems becoming more common again. So there's not much. Again, look at the battery and powertrain. The range of our vehicles increased significantly over the years and will continue to increase. Good, very interesting, but there is no update on the new batteries that should be coming, the 4680 packs that have the different design, which is, you can stack more of them. They're meant to be slightly more efficient, all that kind of stuff. No mention whatsoever, despite this being such a big topic of conversation in the last update. So again, it's almost like this update to me is interesting because of the things they're not mentioning in the update, than because of the things that they are mentioning in the update. And this is a really big thing. Soda points reached, yeah, again, so not interesting to anyone. So I think my cat is trying to do something. So I apologize if you guys can hear some weird noises in the background. I think there's some tail chasing going on. Anyway, so the interesting thing over here at the end is we plan to grow our manufacturing capacity as quickly as possible. So they're saying they're going to be growing the manufacturing at a rate of 50% year on year every single year, and they expect that to happen for the next few years on the automotive front. This is really interesting. It's actually very similar. In fact, I had a lower expectation than that on average over the next few years in my assumptions. I had that kind of rate over this and next year, but a slower rate going forward. So if they do maintain 50% or higher, that'll be an interesting one. So if you look at, if I show you just kind of what I was thinking before, 1 second. So if you look over here, I had 1 million vehicles this year, 1.5 next year, 1.97, 2.5, 3. So I kind of had this slowdown because they're obviously building so many factories right now that should be producing these cars that I was particularly excited by. So I'm quite happy because this number is actually looking like it's quite likely, because I think most people had expectations about 870 or 880 for this year. I think I might not be too far off on this one. This one, obviously, we have no idea. But anyway, let's jump right back into where shall I put myself? Let's put myself over here. So we have sufficient liquidity to fund our product roadmap on cash. These are just generic statements. So that's what we've got. We're currently building Model Y capacity Gigafactory building in Gigafactory, Texas, and remain on track to start production deliveries from each location in 2021. So this is my sort of update, just as a brief summary, just before. Let's see if there's anything going on. Sign up to listen to the podcast. Let me just jump. I'm just gonna do this so that you guys are not bored by me filling in forms. But the big takeaways for me are the energy sector is down considerably for Tesla, and there are no good explanations for what's happening. Oh, chip news. Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that. That's one of the the chip news is affecting everything, though. It's affecting every other manufacturer just as well. And it's affecting like so many industries. It's just amazing. You can't buy any tech that uses these chips. You can't buy like a Sony PlayStation. You can't buy an Xbox. You can't buy a graphics card. Processors like AMD processors are sold out. AMD is doing an update tomorrow. I think it's going to be interesting because it's kind of weird. Like the shortage is not an absolute shortage. It's not like they were producing, and then bang, it dropped. It's more like the demand has skyrocketed so high and so fast that the production just couldn't keep up. And so we're seeing this kind of, and it's a really good point. The production line is definitely one of the things that is being slow. So let's see. So we are 7.5 minutes away. So we were so the other thing that I think is really important is the fact that they had this number over here, the 0 production on the Model S, Model X. This to me is really important because this is not just a low number, this is 0, and this is continuing into this quarter. And the update in words didn't say anything about what their expectation on when this is going to finish is. So I'm a bit concerned as to how long this is going to go on for. Are there other issues as well going on? Are they just prioritizing the growth of the build of the factories while the chip shortage is going on and kind of not really focusing their attention on this? So that's another really interesting point that I want to hear what they say about. And the Tesla Semi and the new factory and the Model 2. These are big. These are really big. They kind of didn't say anything about them anywhere, but the fact that the Semi is now being produced in a separate factory, I want to hear more about the fact that what this thing is over here and exactly what the timeline potentially on this is. So in my expectations, what did I have for the Model 2? I had 2023 at the Giga Berlin and same for Giga Shanghai. So I was only expecting the first ones to begin being manufactured and actually relatively low volumes in 2023. So this probably is actually in line with what I was thinking before this was announced. So I'm quite excited by this. I'm just wondering why this is being pushed back. So they've been doing so much press. They've been showing these Tesla trucks driving around, but it looks like they're pushing them back. So that'll be an interesting one as well. By the way, I have my Gus's world famous fried chicken glass. It's a place in Memphis. It's very cool. Right. What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this update? Because to me, it's kind of like this stuff that's being published is kind of not that exciting. Yeah. So, sorry, just before we dive into the live update, but tell me in the comments what people think. But the one really big thing for me is that energy. That's probably the biggest news here for me in terms of things that are screaming. The drop in the deployment, which is very noticeable. Where is it? I've been scrolling too much here. I think it's on this page. So the drop in the deployment, way lower. I mean, like we're talking like Q2 last year levels. Like this is a big drop, and I appreciate the cyclical nature of these things. Tax writers, I still think this is more than I would have wanted to see, a lot more of a drop. And the worst thing about this is when you look at the numbers further down, past the photos. Let's look at the photos in a second, just before we jump to Elon. This 100, we have 595 costs and 494 profit, so we're minus 101 million on that business. So if you look at the numbers across time, we haven't seen. So look, Q3 579 558, Q2 370 349, Q1 293 versus 282. So they're like not deploying that many. They're losing revenue in terms of like per unit deployed. They're actually losing money on the business. That's increasing. So I'm not hearing anything good on that. So I would expect the price tomorrow to drop. As to how far it drops, it really depends on who's selling what, because obviously ARK is big, and ARK have a big bet on robo-taxis, etc. But here we are, we have another whole quarter that has passed without any update on FSD, which is sort of the precursor to a robo-taxis, etc. Right? And so we're kind of saying, oh, well, are we going to have another quarter of this? How long is it going to take? Because this is still not the final version. This is still not going to be the all singing, all dancing version. So I think like it's going to be interesting to see what some of these funds are going to be doing on the back of this news, because like the actively managed funds, especially some of the tech ones, because they've become so much more prominent, so much larger more recently. But let's look at the factory pictures, because I kind of skipped them last time, and the update is still... Oh, okay. Nothing on there just yet. It's audio only. We'll have to jump on it at past and see what's happening. Let's look at these pictures. Model Y factory construction in Berlin. Looking good, looking good. So you can see that these are sort of relatively new, because these weren't there on the last set of pictures I was looking at. There's not much on the roof. I don't know what they're going to be doing there. Probably solar to make it look jazzy or something. This is the press for the Model Y. Not the big one. I'm surprised they've put this picture over here, and this is the Gigafactory Berlin Gigacasting, but they didn't put the picture of the casting facility they've already put into Austin, despite there being... So there's a channel where a guy does these videos where he posts them online of like a daily view on what they've been building over in Austin, and I watch them because I have nothing else to do with my life. And so I saw that they were installing that about a week or two ago, so, or maybe even more than that now. But that should be in. And this is the Gigafactory Texas. You can see like they're already building the surrounding parts over here. So that'll be interesting. Oh my god! All right, I'm gonna need to just jump off for a sec. Otherwise, we're gonna get cat noises all through the actual live. One sec. All right, let's look at this Model Y factory construction. So all looking good. Some machinery being built in here, but you can see this is a very tactically taken photo, right? So they put some of the big robots in here, but there's nothing really in the background. There's no production line. There's no anything. So I think some of these are more tactical. So I think although the Texas production the build looks good, I think it's still very early doors to say that. Like they're saying that they're going to begin construction of vehicles manufacturing. I'm not sure I completely buy into that. So let's see. Shanghai expansion continues. So this is all good. This is all exciting. They're building new factories, and obviously the other big news from Shanghai that they still haven't really been confirming. Maybe they will on this call. Is that they bought an extra giant plot of land, like half the size. Which direction is it? I think it's to the south on the map. I can't tell which way the south is. I think it might be down. Is it down? It's either down from this or that way. I can't remember which way it is. I think maybe it's this way. I can't remember. They bought a giant chunk of land on top of this, and a picture of the semi without really any explanations. So let's just hear what Elon has to say. But I think the interesting thing is not going to be what they say necessarily in the update, although Elon does sometimes say interesting stuff, but it's more what are they going to what are the questions going to be, and what are they going to be saying about that. So let's jump right in and see if there's anything going on here. Nothing much just yet. What are people saying on the comments? Seems mixed news. Yeah, it's mixed. I actually think it's more negative for me than positive, just because the stuff that like the positive news were almost like kind of expected and baked into the price already, but some of the other things that people were hoping for were not expected. Sorry, that people kind of hoping would happen have not happened. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. Well, we'll continue to stand by. So it'll be interesting to hear what people say about that. What people say about what the expectation is on the next factory builds. What is this TBD factory, or why are things moving? There's a lot of question marks for me. I think much of Tesla's success will relied on FSD. When the other auto manufacturers ramp up their EV efforts, Tesla won't have much of a unique selling point. I'm not sure I agree necessarily with that. I think FSD is actually going to be the one thing that's going to be like very commoditized in the future, because just like people will figure it out, techies will move between companies. I think it's more going to be the battery design, the the specifics of the components and how they work together, and all those kind of things. Because that's what the science is like. You've got to look at some of the other industries which people thought cannot be sort of reimagined in this way. Elon talking now. People say he's talking. I'm confused. This is the official webs. This is the official website. I just reloaded it. No, still nothing. So yeah. What else people say? They have insane margins and are making money. Other autos not. So on the FSD front, I'm not sure that that's going to be the big driver. Just look at TVs, for example, right? So TVs, kind of everyone thought that there was nothing really tech-wise that can happen. Along come LG, develop a completely new generation tech. Suddenly, they're selling screens for every mobile phone, for almost all the big new fancy TVs coming out, for any other OLED screens, pocketing all the royalties from it because they're patented the heck out of that. And I think this is going to be the next battle in cars as well, because it's sort of like the unseen, the tech jumps in the battery design and development, which is why everyone's racing for it. That's why Tesla is dumping, all of that money on R&D. Actually, that's one thing I didn't really talk about necessarily. So the capex kind of jumped up, but the R&D jumped up massively as well. Just while this is happening, let's go and have a look at where the R&D is here. Look at this bit. So it increased a lot in Q4, but it continued increasing considerably. So we're talking $670 million spent on R&D, which is considerable. So I do appreciate that there's all these different models being designed at the same time and the refresh. But that'll be interesting. It's interesting with 3 minutes. People are saying that he's speaking, but I'm just literally refreshing this, and I'm not sure. This is the official cast. Here we go. It's interesting. Can you guys hear this music, by the way? Can you hear this music? Tell me if you can, because I'm expecting to play this live through this, and if not, I am really in a bad position. Tell me if you can hear this. Oh dear. It's not good. Yeah, this is where I'm really not happy with using this stuff that I'm using. Oh no. It is on YouTube though. It's either my desktop audio is coming through or it's not coming through. There's still music, so we're still good on that. Oh dear. Add an audio channel. All right. Can you guys hear this now? Let's see if you can hear this. I just added my headphones as something that maybe you can hear. You can hear me double? Oh dear. Okay. Hopefully this will work now. I'm sorry about that. Echo. Oh. Oh. Oh dear. Apologies for that. Oh, this is not good. I've talked a lot about what my thinking is. No, I've taken the mic out of my headphones, so it's not that.
Are in a listen-only mode. After the presentation, there will be a
All right, can you guys hear this? Sorry, guys. I just thought I fixed it, but for some reason it's not coming through. Oh dear. No, I'm guessing people can't hear this. He's not said anything important yet, but this is very frustrating. So my lack of tech skills, and also not the best internet. One sec. You guys can hear me? Can you hear Elon? Oh. Oh. Alright. Well, if you guys can't hear Elon, you should probably go and join a different live stream where you can hear him. I really apologize for this. I think it's whenever I try to play something live, you can hear me with an echo. Let me just put myself back. I apologize for this. It's just I think when I try to go and stream something to my computer and then restream it back out, it just does not work. And so you should go and watch somewhere else. I've already told you everything I thought about it. We went through the numbers, went through all the details. So hopefully that was interesting. But if you guys want to hear what Elon has to say, just go and jump onto the ir.tesla.com or livestream.tesla.com and follow it there. But thank you very much for joining. Yeah, I appreciate it. Josh is saying, I think there's just an issue with when I stream something and it just does not work because I'm streaming, like my internet just goes funny. So this is something that I need to fix at some point in the future, but not something that